Hey everybody, it's Cam here from the Nerd Book Review. Today I'll be reviewing A City in the Dragon's Eye by Jordan Noyle Short. It's the first book in the Dragonreich series. It's 290 pages long, and it will be released February 12th of 2024, so just a few days after this review airs. I did receive an ARC, obviously, if I am reading it before the book was released. I want to do a quick disclaimer on this one for some people. This is an adult book. I wouldn't say it's like crazy dark or anything like that, but there's plenty of dick jokes, plenty of drugs and alcohol. There is a fairly long scene in a city and at a university that kind of reminds me of a toga party in college. So there's plenty of talk of sex, but there's nothing like super descriptive when it comes to sex, but there's definitely lots of drugs and alcohol. And then the main like bad guy is a Joseph like Goebbels kind of guy. Definitely racist. The story seems to be based off of like Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark in terms of like the inspiration behind it. It's not very similar, obviously, to that. It's not derivative, but that's kind of where I feel like the inspiration comes from. And so you do have like the main bad guy, Oberman. He's trying to find a magical artifact so that he can use it to wipe out dwarves, elves, the other magical abilities that are in the book. And so I'll get into more of that a little bit more detail when I talk about the plot. But just so you know, like there's lots of racism and, you know, like derogatory terms used towards dwarves and elves. And so that is a big plot line if that's something that's going to bother you. There's not any point where Oberman and the stand-in for the Nazis are the good guys. They're the bad guys from the very beginning. Victor, the main character, never even contemplates joining them. He always thinks they're bad guys. There's no, the Nazis and their ideology being good in any way, shape, or form. So just wanted to throw that out there just in case, though. I think that the drugs and alcohol would be the bigger reason why you would not want a younger kid or maybe like early teen to be reading this book. If you don't have a problem with Indiana Jones, then you're not going to have a problem with that part of it here. Okay, if you want at this point to go past my description of the magic, the plot line, and all that kind of stuff, then right there is the timestamp for when I get to the bad, the good, and my final thoughts. I'm going to read the book blurb, and then we'll get right into it. Victor's magic is turning him into a dragon, and it's not pretty. To save his friends from a deadly ambush, Victor drew too deeply on the power of the dragon well, and now a magical tumor has begun to change him, one scale at a time. Victor sets off on a quest for a cure that will lead him to a remote sanitarium. Here, he will uncover a mad doctor's strange experiments, a very stubborn dwarf, and rumors of an ancient mirror that may hold the key to Victor's very survival. As a secret society of dragon fanatics closes in, Victor must choose between the power his transformation offers and the hope of finding a cure. To the fabled tyrant's tomb, Victor races the mysterious Thule Society, where deadly traps and cryptic puzzles protect a treasure of unspeakable power. With every heartbeat, the tumor's corruption spreads. Can a court dandy and a disgraced scholar help Victor find his cure? Or is it too late to help save the city from a mad doctor's dark designs? So that's a pretty good plot summary right there, but I will, just expand on it just a little bit. Let's start off with the world. The best way that I imagined it is as a post-World War I Europe kind of, but with some magical races thrown in. Victor, our main character, there are 3 point of view characters, but Victor's definitely the main character. He is a young man at the beginning of the book. An armistice has actually just been signed where his country, Rheinvelt, has lost the war. They really blame the dwarves. The dwarves were their allies, and they basically just retreated and went to their typical dwarven kingdom in the mountain and abandoned them, and they ended up losing. So Victor's squad, he has made it to the end of the war, and there is an armistice has actually just been signed, and they think the war's over, but they get ambushed one last time by the forces they're called Romavians, not really important, but they do use Death Knights, with different kind of magic, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But Victor is forced to use his magic a little bit too strongly, and ends up giving him a dragon tumor. Basically, it looks like scales on him. Different people have different bad results from using too much magic too strongly. And So eventually this tumor will drive him insane, and he's kind of shunned as a result of that. So he ends up having to kind of go around from place to place for a while. And then Dr. Oberman, who's like the evil Nazi scientist, think of him that way, he actually gets Victor to go to a sanitarium where he tells him he could be cured. Victor finds out what the plot is, which, as I've mentioned already, is the evil scientist trying to become even more powerful using a magical artifact, a la Raiders of the Lost Ark, and wipe out everyone they consider inferior. Victor does not go along with that. He does hope he can use the magical artifact in the end to, save himself, but he's definitely not on board with what Dr. Oberman and the Thule Society wants to do. That's a pretty good, summary of the plot right there, as well as the world. As far as like technology goes, I think that we would have to think of it kind of more like early Renaissance. They have blunderbusses. The dwarven magic allows them to use like mechanical constructs, so they've got like zeppelins have just been created. The guns are very primitive, but they are, like I said, blunderbusses. But they use them a little bit. Certainly not, most people are still fighting with swords. Magic seems to be an ability that you get from your bloodline. So like Reinfeldt has dragon magic, which comes from the dragon well. Ramavians have the void well, which kind of makes like Death Knight necromancers. Let me go ahead and describe the different magics real quick, and we'll move right along then. I always have to look at the notes for the magic system. It is pretty cool. First off, as mentioned, different countries have different magic, same with different races. So the dwarves have their own magic, the elves have their own magic. There seems to be there was a legendary races of the past, and they created this magic. So real quick though, the dragon well, as mentioned, gives you like strength. If you always want to suck the power in. If you're using more powerful things that are using it on other people, like so Victor, what he actually does that causes him to get his cancer in the first place is sprays dragon fire out. He sprays that dragon fire to try to save his friends during that ambush. The Ramavians, as mentioned, they have the void well, which creates death knights. Death knights look like they're dead. Their flesh gets shrunken and shriveled, and it's mentioned that they smell bad. There's the Libram well, which we see quite a bit of. It grants divination powers. The Crucible. The Crucible is what gives dwarves their mechanical magic. There's the Sylvan well, which elven nature magic, but I don't remember seeing that in this book. Then we have the Demon well, which I also didn't see. And then the Jotun well, or Jotun well, which creates giants. We only see like one example of that one either as well. Then apparently there's also one called the Sacred well, which creates saints, but we didn't see that in this book. I talked with the author a little bit, just kind of trying to see like what would be spoilers and where it's going. I always bring this up that it's funny to me that some things that I would consider spoilers are now just like common in the book blurbs, whereas they didn't used to be. Book blurbs used to be shorter, and I felt like they were a lot more vague than they are now. So you see a lot more of the plot within that now. Real quick, let's talk about the three main characters. There's Victor, as mentioned. His whole storyline is him trying to figure out that magical cure while also trying to stop the stand-in for the Nazis. There's a character named Devin. He's the son of a very, very powerful noble. They're like wizards in the city of Danburg, where a lot of the story takes place. That's where the university is, and where the magical artifact will be that they're trying to either find or stop people from finding. His father is like on the ruling council because he's got like one of the magical artifacts that comes from that tyrant king that they had previously imprisoned. And so Devin, he's a character. He is gay. It's not really discussed too much. There's a few allusions to it, but he is a thief. At the very beginning of his plot line, he's disowned by his father for getting caught at the very least and being in disgrace to, his very powerful family. The third character is Isola. I really like Isola. She is in her mid to late 30s. She had married young to a professor while she was at the university. She is able to use that divination magic. She had a kid. The kid's now grown up. Her daughter's 19. And she divorced her husband, the professor, because she wasn't the only student he was sleeping with, and he didn't stop sleeping with students and when he did get married to her. And so at the very beginning of her storyline, she's trying to get full tenure as a professor at the college, and her thesis is based off of like magical artifacts and things like that. That's how she's going to kind of get tied into this story and end up mixed up with Victor. And so she, her husband manages to get himself on her board that she's defending her thesis and screws that all up for her. And so that's where, her storyline is going to come into play. Devin, I did forget to mention that his father, as mentioned, is in that city and ends up being, Devin ends up getting tied up into the plot line as well, mostly because of bad choices that he has made to owing bad people money. All three of them will spend time together at various points in the book. But as I mentioned, I liked Isola a lot because she is, probably one of the more competent characters, probably more competent than Victor and Devin most of the time. She doesn't serve to just be a love interest of one of the characters. Big fan of her and her, competence. Getting into the bad, the good, and my final thoughts. The bad. If you're really sensitive to like racist comments, things like that, it's mostly directed towards dwarves, but it's something that maybe like could definitely bother some people. It didn't bother me any, but obviously as a cis white male, not the target of these things. The characters who are like the evil Nazi characters are white, but there are issues more with like that dragon magic and the purity of people and the bloodlines who can use that dragon magic. I would imagine if we spent time with like the Death Knights or any of the other people that could use theirs, they're probably going to have a little bit of racism based on like their magic. And mixing bloodlines also makes it so that it's unsure if you can use that magic. So for example, Devin, his father, despite being one of the head nobles of the people that use the dragon magic, his mother was Ramavian, and because of that, he isn't able to use the dragon magic. And so I guess there is a little bit of that kind of concern, and stuff. So, but that could be something that you could consider bad. You could probably consider like the dick jokes and things like that an issue if you're, you don't like that. Also, there is like, it's kind of like a spell-induced big orgy, but lots of sex. It's not like vividly described, but they're going around the city and people are just randomly having sex or destroying things because of this magical spell. That could be an issue that some people would have. I didn't think that there was any, there's no like outright rapes, right? But, and then the last thing, and this one, another friend of mine who's reviewed the book actually brought up, is that Devin being gay, there are some people that make like dandy jokes about him a couple of times. I didn't notice it myself, but once again, the whole being, a cis white male thing, I don't know that there was like a bunch of jokes like that. And the other reviewer said that it wasn't like, overtly offensive to them, but that it was something that they noticed. So that's something that you might think about as well. But otherwise, I don't think that, this book is only 290 pages long. I feel like the storyline's pretty tight. And it doesn't wander or meander. And it was very entertaining and stuff like that. So let's kind of already start to talk about the good, but let me talk about what I think the really strengths of this story are in the good. The book is action-packed from the very beginning to the very end. There is no, big lull. Even like the world-building lulls that are happening is when like they're like wandering through a big, that big huge party during this festival. And so like there's always things going on around them while they're, describing things and kind of getting up to speed on certain things that are happening. The info dump periods also are usually done. They're interspersed, but I think they're really well done. A lot of them are where we're like Isola, because she is an expert on this kind of occult stuff, right? That's what she was going to be doing her thesis on. And she's going around and through the story, like telling Victor or telling other people about the things. She's an expert and she's telling them to people who don't have any knowledge. And that's really the way I like an info dump to be done. I found the book to be really funny. I thought the humor, I don't think the humor went too far personally. There are a few dick jokes, but I think there were actually fewer potty jokes than I expected after reading a couple of other reviews. So I think that's done pretty well. And also, I read this book, all 290 pages, in one sitting. So clearly, it kept me entertained the entire time. It was, like I said, it was action-packed. I thought it was extremely well written and flowed really well. Nothing ever took me out of that movie in my mind. I think I just had a good time while I was reading this book. It is irreverent. It's not a book that is, trying to be like super emotionally impactful and things like that. So, getting into my final thoughts. Now, here's where I always have trouble rating these kind of books. And when I say these kind of books, I mean books that are humorous, irreverent, that their main purpose is just to be really entertaining. C.T. Phipps is probably my example that I use the most. I've read like 20 of his books. He's got his superhero, villainy books, Moon Cops on the Moon I did a review of, where it's kind of ridiculous and its main job is to make you laugh and entertain you and not to be like that emotionally impactful. Like, it's not like the Tainted Dominion series by Crystal Matar, where it's at times emotionally devastating or things like that. The purpose of this book is for you to have fun and to enjoy yourself while you're reading them. And so sometimes I have trouble like rating those, because did I think that it did that very well? Absolutely. If you want an entertaining book, I'm going to absolutely recommend this. This is going to go up there. It is his first book, this style. I have not read his other stuff, but it was a grimdark series. And so I think that I'll wait till I see a second one of these come out before I really throw him out as like a big, recommendation for these kind of books, the way that like C.T. Phipps, if anybody ever asked me like, what is a funny, irreverent book that you want to read? Or maybe like the Legends of the First Empire book, audiobooks from Michael J. Sullivan that are funny and irreverent as well. But great start to a series. I think I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. And it's not, quite going to go on my favorite books of the year list, but I think that it could go on some people's. It's like I said, it's really well written, very entertaining, action-packed throughout. There are those, sex scenes or dirty jokes, but for the most part, I think it's done pretty well. And if this is what you're looking for, is a funny, entertaining book, then I can absolutely recommend it. I do have to say, though, I feel like maybe the cover and the book blurb don't go quite the right way in terms of getting you prepared for it, because if I hadn't read the other review and talked to the other reviewers before I read this one, I might have been expecting something completely different. So I do think that maybe the cover needed something a little sillier, and maybe the book blurb should have mentioned, the dick jokes, or I don't know. Maybe it could have been something that I might have been a little bit confused. It certainly wasn't what I initially expected. I think that it was really good, and I thought from the very beginning, as soon as you start reading, you're getting those silly jokes right off the bat. So you know what you're getting into once you start reading it. But I think it's possible that there might be some people that will buy this book expecting something different if they haven't read any reviews or watched any reviews of it. So like I said, I'm going to give this one a 9 out of 10. Just missing out on that, that 10 out of 10, but I still really enjoyed the book. I thought it was definitely well worth my read. And as I mentioned, I read it in one afternoon. So, entertaining, quick, fun read at 290 pages. All right, I hope you guys all have a wonderful time, and thank you for watching my videos. If you would like and subscribe to my channel, I would greatly appreciate it. Thanks.